to kind of talk about the Big 12 and the Texas and Oklahoma and the SEC and kind of everything that is moving on with realignment. We're going to kind of talk about it in a couple sections, but we're not going to get pigeonholed by that. We're just going to let the conversation kind of go where it's going to go.
Mm-hmm.
But so I guess, Dan, if do you want to start with your thoughts first, or you want me to start with mine?
I'll go ahead and just kind of start with our first instincts. What was our first thoughts when
Okay.
the news
You want me
came?
to you want me to tell you mine first?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I have some like mixed feelings. So at first I'm kind of like excited about it because it's like, oh wow, something's happening in the off season. Like this is neat.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I think in some ways this can be good, but like in my mind, I think that everyone wants to improve the sport. And that's not the case. Not everyone wants to improve the sport. They want to make more money. And I think that at the end of the day, that's what this is. And so I'm feeling as the news has settled and things have kind of happened,
Mm-hmm.
I think that this is not great for college football. I think one thing that makes college football really great is the fact that there are so many teams and it's very regionalized. Um, and it needs to become more of a national sport in order to advance. However, I think that that also takes away from what makes the sport so great. Um, the sport currently isn't fair and there is not a lot of parity. And I think that that is something to consider because my goal, if I was to revamp the sport, would be to add parity, to make things more equalized for the smaller schools and the bigger schools. But that's not what this is.
No, this
Um,
is this is
this
the
is
rich getting even richer, and in turn making the poor even poorer.
yes, um, and really, what I'm concerned about is that we're giving ESPN too much power in college football.
I mean, I feel like
Um,
they kind of just taken it just by buying up all the rights. They just
yeah,
they
well,
just took the power. They didn't even really ask
yeah,
anybody. They didn't really, hey, NCAA. Well, I could go talk about the NCAA because what I think college football really needs, if it wants to get to this goal of parity that you're talking about,
is a college football czar
is a
or a
governing
commissioner.
body of any
Yes,
kind that is at least
yes,
somewhat competent and at least somewhat willing even to try and attempt to do the job, because
yes.
I
I
feel like
agree.
the NCAA right now in Indianapolis, they care about making more money for themselves and all of its members, and that's really about it. They don't really care about anything else.
Well, and I feel like one, I think that the NCAA has kind of given up any sort of resemblance of control with this.
Yeah, they've let it
I mean,
happen.
they used to pretend that they had control, but after NIL happened, they're like, well, we don't have any control anymore, so
Yeah,
whatever, fuck it.
yeah,
I feel like that is what has happened,
yeah.
and Texas and Oklahoma and the powers that be were waiting for the NCAA to kind of hit this weak point where they feel like they have no power to control anything, and that's where we're at.
Yeah.
And,
So when I first heard this news, and I know Cody and I kind of had a in the moment when it first broke, like, hey,
yeah,
Texas and Oklahoma are planning on moving. I compared it to the Super League, that had
yeah,
happened just a couple months ago. I thought that this is where this is heading. When I first heard the news, I'm like, okay, well, this is just the first domino to fall. Now, what's stopping Ohio State? What's stopping Clemson? What's stopping all of these big national brand programs from just saying, fuck it, let's just start our own conference and get one giant TV rights deal from an ESPN or an Amazon or whoever would be paying for it, and just get a buttload of money and just split it between ourselves and start our own playoff and the whole 9 yards. But what stopped the Super League is it has governing bodies with actual power. It has UEFA and it has FIFA that were like, we're gonna stop your players from being eligible for national teams and put fine you a whole bunch. But there is just no governing body like that
yeah,
in NCAA who has the power to go to the Texas or Oklahoma AD and say, no, you can't do this. Stop.
And, and I think that this is kind of where this might be headed. So my thing though, really, it comes down to, and I'm gonna read. I wrote out some thoughts.
Go ahead.
Um, and I think this is bad for college sports for the NCAA to be giving too much control to the TV networks. ESPN frequently lays people off. Like it feels like every year they lay some popular reporters off, and they make budget cuts in order to make profit. And ESPN is changing college football without regard to tradition, without regard to rivalries, and the things that make college football great. Um, and so I think that the fans that are so loyal to the sport are going to get left in the dust with this. We need to make more money.
Yeah.
Um,
I think that's a fair argument. I think we can get into more of the fan aspects and how does a fan react if you're a fan of Oklahoma or Texas, how do you respond to this? I do want to say ESPN's made a very distinct change over the last 5 to 7 years, where ESPN was like where you went for Sports Center, and it was like you got all your news, your highlights, the journalism, and like yeah, they had the NBA and they had Monday Night Football, but they weren't where you went for all of your live sports. And it seems like they've made a decision where they're just going to be a home for
everything,
live sports and breaking news. That's all they're doing, because
it's cheaper. They don't have to make that content. It's just there.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, is these networks are trying to make money. So what happens when the networks totally change college football and the fans lose interest? Because that's what's happened in the NFL, is fans have lost interest because the TV personality. I mean,
NFL,
there's a lot of reasons.
NFL is the only sport where ratings have stayed solid. Everything else has gone down. NFL stayed. There's nothing wrong with it.
They've stayed solid, but there's been a loss of support for the teams at the local level.
I don't know if I completely buy that. I think the NFL is just a monster that just keeps on growing, and there's really not. It is a monster.
I'm not saying that there's. But what happens when ESPN stops being able to continue to increase the money that they're making every year? What happens when they're like, okay, well, this kind of isn't as popular as it used to be? Cut. Then college football loses its funder.
It's not like ESPN's the only television partner available. Like there's competition.
I mean, they're not, but they're the biggest by far.
I think there's a whole nother world that we haven't even explored yet, and for money from this is streaming. Like, just wait until Amazon really starts dipping its toe in all this streaming stuff, and we start to see how much money they can throw. Because like ESPN obviously owned by Disney, so Disney's got a bunch of money, but they don't have Amazon money. Like nobody's got Amazon money, and
no,
I don't think.
I guess what I'm saying is like what happens when it becomes this. What happens when ESPN actually controls it? Like, are they going to start cutting teams because they don't like them?
I think
because
that could happen.
Yeah. Because the teams don't have any control over their destiny. It's not like in the NFL where the players have a vote or the owners have a vote, so they're not going to vote someone out because they don't want to be voted out.
Yeah.
They're not going to give that control, but the NCAA has given that control to ESPN without a fight.
Yeah.
I find that to be particularly concerning. All of these negatives, though, there's some potential positives for me. And I think so. I think in its current form, college football has some major issues. And I think that this could potentially help align enough people so that some of these issues begin to be addressed. So
like what specifically? What's one issue that this could solve?
Okay, so in any sport, your goal is to win a championship, right? Yeah. In this sport, there are 70 plus teams that in my lifetime will never ever sniff a championship.
I mean, on this at this pace, it's like 120 because at this point it's like 7 teams can realistically win the national championship over the next 20 years.
I think in any year, there's only, 5, 10 teams that are going to be good enough to win a national championship. But over the course of time, you hope to see that change a little bit. And it's not changing. It has not really changed in 5, 6 years. And that's concerning to me.
Well, it's all set up for it to be not for there not to be parity because
Yes.
if
Yes.
if you're in Alabama, you're so far ahead of everybody else because they were good at the right time where TV rights started skyrocketing, and
Yes.
then the playoff comes in and there's an appearance fee. Like if you make the playoffs, you get an extra. I think it's like $18 million from ESPN for.
And it goes to your conference.
Yes. Well, no, it actually goes to you as a team.
But most of the conferences have a stipulation that if you get an appearance fee, it goes to the conference.
Oh, okay. I did not know that.
So it goes to the conference.
I forgot what my train of thought was.
We were talking. Well, so I'll continue my train of thought, and maybe you can.
Okay.
You can think of this up. But maybe, and I've been kind of contemplating this in my mind, is maybe a different division in football. A division in football will create parity, because Bowling Green is never going to be able to compete with Alabama ever. Yeah. But maybe they could compete with some of the FCS teams. So maybe the MAC and some of the other smaller conferences say, hey.
So this all originated from me asking you what's one positive thing that this can come out of. And
yes.
So I guess it's separate, but so you're saying that there's a separation and you segment the conferences, and you segment all of the teams even to smaller. So right now we got Division 1 FCS. So if this becomes a super conference and it's just like these 20 teams and they're separate from the rest of college football, yeah, there's parity because then this other division, but you still know that all these teams are the best of the best, and like, yeah, Bowling Green wins the second division thing, but they're not really the national champion.
No, I mean, like, I get it. I'm not saying that this is the best thing that could happen. What I am saying is, in its current point, I don't see the point in competing if there's no possible way. I mean, there is no possible way that even Cincinnati, who's a great team, has a shot to make the playoffs. It's impossible for them, and they are a great team. So if a team that good is that good and has absolutely no conceivable path to get to a national championship, what's the point?
The point is make money and your fans and support and
stupid.
Creating a sense of tradition and family.
But that's
and
stupid.
Event.
There's no point. That's that, and to me that there's no logic behind it. I've been against the idea that the group of five should break off from the Power Five, but honestly, the more and more this talks about, the more and more I'm like, yeah, I honestly think they should, because there's no way that they're going to be able to convince the Power Five to give them more money or to give them more players. Like, there's no way that they're going to be able to convince them. So what's the path forward? Who's going to be able to wrangle the Power Five and say, hey, you guys need to start sharing with the group of five? Because no one's going to be able to do that. That will cause them to leave the NCAA and form a super conference.
Yeah.
So maybe what the solution is to say, hey, let's reevaluate the division system. Maybe we use some form of relegation.
See,
I don't know.
If we couldn't even get relegation in our version of soccer in the MLS, there's no fucking way relegation is happening in college football.
I mean, there isn't. I don't. There isn't a way it happens, but I just, at the current path that we're on, I don't see any other option. So I guess I'm kind of trying to like get on board with it and say, okay, well.
You're looking at this as like, well, I want Cincinnati to at least have a chance to make a national championship. And does this help in that goal? And no, it doesn't, because the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. Or Cincinnati probably just kind of stays the same. But there's really not, and outside of a complete rebuilding from the ground up of the NCAA, of the way that the TV rights deals work, like, unless there's a complete rebuild of the system, there's really no way to get that true parity that you want. It's just
I
not
know.
going to happen.
I realize that. So I guess like what I more of what I'm saying is I realize there's no way to get that true parity. It's never going to happen. I'm an idealist, so I want it to happen. So maybe the idea that there are 4 or 5 super conferences, maybe they have 16 to 20 teams each.
So yeah, you want to kind of morph this into like our best case scenario and worst case scenario?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So I
Go with
guess
your best case scenario.
my best case scenario is that there are 5 super conferences with 20 teams each.
Okay. How many total teams in the
100 teams.
There's 127 right now, I think. So
Yeah.
that would include removing almost 20 or almost 30 teams from Division 1. Okay.
I mean, it could even be 4 super conferences. I don't really care.
That's what my best case scenario was 4 super conferences. Because like you mentioned earlier, I think the regional aspect of college football is such a big thing, and I want to keep. Ideally, I think we keep some of that. I know West Virginia's in the Big 12 and Louisville's in the ACC, and we do have some outliers in terms of that, but I think if we have a West Coast Super Conference, we have a
Southeast,
just a
Southeast. Yep.
And then we have an East Coast and a Midwest.
Yep.
I think that's the ideal. I don't know how many teams I'd say, because I'm not a big fan of going to these 20, 25 team conferences, or even 16 seems a bit much for me. Because I think that's more just because I'm so used to the 10 to 14 team conferences that I feel like it gets watered down when there's so many teams, and you could realistically not play a team in your same conference for like 3 years.
Yeah. So I kind of broke this down. I kind of made like a graph, and it's not perfect, but in my best scenario, there's a Big 10, there's an SEC, there's a Pac-12, there's an ACC, and I guess the American/Big 12 kind of
morphs into the same thing. Yeah.
Yeah.
Probably staying as the AAC, if I had to guess.
Say that again.
Probably staying as the American Athletic. I don't think they'd take Big 12 names. I don't think they'd rename it. I'd probably say that.
I don't either. So this is the Big 10. It's Ohio State, Michigan, Penn State, Maryland, Indiana, Purdue. It's the current members plus Iowa State and Kansas.
Okay. So 16 teams.
16 teams.
The SEC. On a side note, don't want to stray too far. I don't think Iowa State or Kansas are getting added to the Big 10.
I don't either. I don't think it's going to happen.
Kansas is the only one that I'd consider because of the basketball, because they do bring basketball money, and Big 10 does take basketball seriously. But Iowa State doesn't bring any money in, and if they're going to be really good and just kind of show up, why would the Big 10 founding members want to just invite this team in just to get their butts kicked for the first couple of years?
I tend to agree with you, but also Kansas has kind of said, hey, we want Iowa State to come with us.
Okay, fair enough. I'd say more. And if we're talking in base to reality of what could actually happen, I don't see Iowa State or Kansas joining the Big 10.
I don't either. But this is ideally. The SEC is what it is, plus Texas and Oklahoma. 16. The Pac-12 adds Texas and Oklahoma State.
Texas Tech.
Okay. And also Kansas State is interchangeable there, but whatever. Mm-hmm. Then you have Boston College, ACC, which stays the same with the addition of West Virginia and Notre Dame. And then you have the American with the addition of Boise State, BYU, Kansas State, Baylor, and TCU.
Okay.
So basically you're sitting with everybody at
16 to 18 teams.
15 to 18 teams.
Yeah. I think that's basically the same as mine. I went 4 conferences with more teams, but we got really the same best case scenario. That we still stay somewhat divided and we still have separate conferences. Transitioning into the worst case scenario, it's probably similar for both of us, but my worst case scenario is that this turns into the Super League. I think if this turns into the Super League, all of the money flows into that one conference. And we did an episode on the Super League when that news came out a couple months ago now. How
Only we knew.
yeah, yeah. How these bigger teams make the money for everybody else in the conference. Like the reason ESPN pays the SEC so much money for their rights fees isn't for South Carolina. It's for Alabama and LSU and those monies, and then there's revenue sharing, so it's all split equally between all the teams. So Big 12.
And those big teams, they don't like it.
No, they want all the money for themselves. That's why Texas and
Yeah.
Oklahoma are leaving. We can get more money over here, while we're literally propping this conference up, and then we're getting beat by Iowa State. You're welcome,
Yeah.
Iowa State. We're the reason you're doing so well right now.
And I find it so interesting because I think this is going to cause Texas and Oklahoma fans to disengage.
I think
Because
they're so rabid. I don't think.
I mean, yeah, maybe you're right, but also those two teams should be winning their conference every year, and Oklahoma does win their conference every year. Every year.
Yeah.
I mean, there's nobody else in the Big 12 that's winning the conference. So
I think that those two schools have done such a good job at just creating almost a cult-like feel with their fan
not wrong.
base that it would take a lot for
But I just don't know that this is their. Yes, it's going to make them a ton of money and make them financially solvent. They're going to be great financially.
They're going to make so much
but
money.
As for this,
they're going to make so much money.
So much money. But as for the actual state of the conference or state of the teams and their fan base and how they feel about it, I think it's going to cause a lot of frustration because I guarantee Texas is going to lose to pretty much everybody in the SEC outside of Vanderbilt. They're not as good. They're just straight up not as good as any of those other teams.
I agree.
Oklahoma, they can stand their own, but they're going to be an 8-4 team. They're not going to be a 12-0 team.
But
going into conference championship week.
Texas fans are still around when they're absolutely terrible in the Big 12, a way lesser conference. At least they're in the SEC.
Less.
At least they're, if coming from a fan's perspective, at least we're getting that SEC money. We're getting access to new recruits.
Yes. I guess, but you have a better shot at winning when you're the big fish in a small pond.
Obviously, that wasn't working.
Yes, I mean it wasn't working for them. I mean they had to do something, and it's interesting. It's very interesting for sure. There's so much that can really be said about this.
I'd be curious I wonder who went to who. Do you think Texas went to Oklahoma, or do you think Oklahoma went to Texas, or do you think ESPN reached out to both of them?
I think it was Texas going to Oklahoma.
That probably.
If I'm being entirely honest, I think that's what happened. Because I don't think Oklahoma, despite having a really good big fan base, I don't think they have the clout that Texas has.
I think
Texas
maybe
Texas is a heavyweight, man. They've got the athletic department that will kill you. They've got the stadium that'll kill you. Oklahoma only has an 80,000 person stadium, and I know stadium size doesn't necessarily mean everything, but in terms of the college football world, it really does.
Yeah.
Because the heavy hitters in college football have 100,000 plus stadiums. Every single one of them. Alabama, I think, is at 98,000.
Yeah.
So, and Texas's program just has more access to money, with all the oil and everything like that. So
and the giant alumni base.
Massive alumni base. I don't think Oklahoma goes to Texas and says, "Hey, we should move." I think it's Texas saying, "Hey."
I think honestly, it was probably ESPN reaching out to both of them, "Hey, you guys' contract is ending in 5 years. You want to move over to the SEC?" And Texas was like, "Fuck yeah, I do," and Oklahoma was like, "Yeah, sure, whatever." I think that's probably how it went.
Yeah, no, and then I think that ESPN was also like, how can we get out of paying this and make it happen sooner?
Well, they just buy it out. They just buy out the rest of the contract. This.
Well,
this is happening before 2025. I hope everybody.
I know it is, but what I'm saying, listen to what I'm saying here is, I think ESPN, once they realized Texas and Oklahoma could do it and go, they're like, all right, what's the way that we could pay the least amount of money? And then they're like, these 8 other teams are going to be like kind of
SOL.
fucked. They're going to be shit out of luck. And we kind of like them, but we also are going to have to pay their conference a bunch of money.
Yeah.
I wonder, could we get them to dissolve so we don't have to pay them money? How could we do that? Oh, we have this other conference over here that really wants to be a prominent conference.
Yeah.
Well, there's 8 teams that want to join your conference now.
I don't know, man.
I don't know. It's
I feel like we've kind of hit a wall here. I don't know if I have.
I have an interesting kind of discussion topic. Just it's a little bit unrelated to all of this, but it's related.
Okay.
If the American poached all 8 teams from the Big 12, I don't think that this is going to happen. Truthfully, I don't think they're going to get all 8 teams. But if they poached,
that would be a ridiculously big conference.
it would be a 19-member conference. Yeah. I think they'd have to trim some fat somewhere. But if they manage to poach some of these teams, mainly I'm saying Baylor and TCU, and maybe Oklahoma State and Texas Tech. If they get those 4 teams,
Iowa State.
Yeah, Iowa State. We'll throw in a 5th, bring them to 16. Would you consider them to be? I mean, obviously they're the 5th best conference. I think
right
both
now
of us,
they are.
Wait, what?
Right now, AAC is the 5th best conference. Is that what you're saying?
Okay, but no. With the addition of those 5 teams, would you say they're the 5th best conference?
I'd probably bump them up past. Well, this is saying that the Big 12's gone, so they're automatically
in the 5 best, obviously.
Not better than the Big 10, not bigger than the SEC. Probably a step below the ACC, on par with the Pac-12. Maybe just a hair below the Pac-12. So
honestly, if they're at 16 teams and they have Oklahoma State and those teams, they are better than the Pac-12 for me.
Pac-12 still has the more recognizable brands, though. Like
it has recognizable brands for sure.
You're just adding good football teams. You're not adding any new revenue streams. You're not adding big brands. Like they're still USC.
I'm saying from a competitive standpoint. Like I'm saying from a competitive standpoint. Like how do you view this?
Strictly from a competitive, yes, I'll give you that. But I think from a national perspective, everybody just kind of goes, okay, cool.
Yeah, I mean they become the new Big 12. That's what they are.
Yeah.
That's what they will become. So yeah, it's interesting. It's something that's fun to talk about for sure.
I don't think I really have. We've probably done about 30 minutes or so right now on this, I think. Yeah, we're right at about 30 minutes. I'm kind of looking through my notes here. I think we've kind of touched on everything that I've wanted to talk about. I mean, I think we both agree.
I think
this is just about the money. I mean,
yeah, it's just about the money. One question I have is, do you think that the Big 12 is going to try to save itself by adding like BYU and Houston?
They're stupid if they don't, because if they don't add anybody, they're dead. Like you cannot have a conference this day and age with 8 teams. You just cannot stay. You cannot stay financially, especially without any big name programs. Like Oklahoma State, woo, Iowa State, woo, but TV partners aren't fucking giving you the type of money they're giving the ACC, what they were giving the Big 12 before Texas, Oklahoma left.
Yep. So then I guess my next question related to that is who would they need to add?
There's who do they add to keep at the level they are? Like there's nobody they can add.
They can. But to stay around, who do they try to get?
What you said,
who actually joins?
I think your typical Midwest, West Coast power teams like BYU, Boise State probably gets a call. I think there's really not that many options.
I thought about
Utah
this.
State? That's not exciting.
No, no. So my thoughts were they call in Houston.
Okay, Houston. Yeah, I completely forgot about
They
Houston.
call BYU. They call Boise State. I think they call Cincinnati.
Yeah.
I think they call UCF.
But does Cincinnati and UCF and Cincinnati say no? That's a lateral move.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. I think they call them because you'd be dumb not to call them, because if someone's dumb enough to say, yeah, we'll join you.
Yeah.
But I don't think that. I mean, at this point, unless. So here's the thing: is if the Big 12 pulls off BYU and Boise State, then I think Cincinnati is interested.
Then Big 12 honestly becomes more exciting for me, just for the fact that it's a conference that there's no favorite. Like, anybody could win it. Anybody could win it at any point in a year. There's your parity right there, is the Big 12. If the new Big 12 adds those kind of teams.
Yeah. No, that's exactly what I was like. That sounds really fun. That sounds like a fun conference.
Now that we say that out loud, like, they're never going to be what the Big 12 was or what the ACC, but that's a fun conference to watch. Like,
I'm gonna watch that.
Yeah,
I'll watch the shit out of that. Like, Oklahoma State playing BYU.
Yeah,
what?
That sounds
awesome.
That's gonna be fun to watch. One, gonna be high flying offense, no defense, fun to watch, and literally anybody could beat anybody on any given week, except for Kansas.
And that to me more than anything, that sounds really exciting. I don't think that's what's going to happen. I think more than likely, I think that we're going to see the teams split off from each other and go to a couple different conferences. I think the Big Ten, I don't know who. The thing is about these conferences is, like, are these conferences going to say, okay, we need to be bigger in order to entice bigger contracts?
See,
because they're not going.
It's not the
volume.
They're not,
like, the Big Ten's not going to be able to pull away any big names unless maybe the Pac-12 and the Big Ten say, hey, let's do something together, and they maybe pull some Pac-12 teams away. I don't know.
Yeah, but see, the Big Ten, the only conference above the Big Ten is the SEC, and there's nobody that they could realistically add that adds value in terms of a TV contract coming in. So, and I think all of the teams in the conference have to approve the new team being added in. I don't know if that's true, but
I don't know.
I assume that all the teams have to approve it. And why would you approve a team entering like Iowa State, who probably right now would be the best available team that could be added to the Big Ten, where you're adding them and they're not really increasing the value from a TV contract, but it's another team that's subtracting away from that overall total, so you're getting less money just by adding them.
So, and
there's no motivation for Big Ten.
No, I fully agree with you 100%. What I'm asking more than that is, how do these other conferences compete with the SEC? And does the SEC start to unload some of their less successful, less money style teams in favor of asking Michigan and Ohio State to join?
See, I feel like there's a rule where they can't just kick teams out of the conference. Like, maybe there's a contract with, I don't know, but I feel like they just can't just kick teams out of the conference. I think there's one way that the Big Ten can kind of start catching up, and it's adding Notre Dame to your conference. That's
never going to happen. They will join the ACC before they join the Big Ten.
I think that's stupid, though.
I think it's stupid, but they will. I mean, if they have to join a conference or join the ACC, that is clearly what is going to happen.
Yeah, I still think it's stupid. They should be in the Big Ten. They should be in the Big Ten.
They are in Big Ten footprint, but then you've got 3 Indiana schools in the Big Ten.
So,
I mean, I just don't think that Indiana and Purdue are going to be like, we want to lose to Notre Dame every year.
Well, we could beat them in basketball. That's what really matters in the state of Indiana.
I guess. Yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of conversations to be had, but it's just like, how do they compete? How do they step up so that they can try to be
I
bigger conference?
I don't think they're worried right now with just like I don't think just adding Texas and Oklahoma to the conference like yeah that means even more money, but I don't think Big Ten's necessarily threatened by this move. Like
I think they are.
not
I think they
terribly,
are.
not like
I think they are because of money, because of the money that is involved with this deal. I think we're going to see the SEC, every single team in the SEC making $30 to $40 million a year off a TV contract, and that blows what the Big Ten is getting out of the water.
yeah.
Like those are the numbers that are being thrown around, and I mean the Big Ten can't compete with that. So the only path to get to compete with that is to add big name programs outside of that. So what? Maybe they go after Clemson. Maybe they go because I mean the ACC it doesn't have.
Sad again, man. I'm getting sad.
I don't know.
I'm going back to what my first reactions were when I first read this. I think this is all leading to one super conference where all the teams are in.
I'm very curious.
And my Purdue Boilermakers just die as we don't get the money from Ohio State and Michigan anymore, so we just die as an athletic department. And
I mean,
it's very sad. I'm
I think that there's no answer to this, and I don't think it's ever going to be perfect. I think we're going to see something interesting happen in the next few months. I think that Oklahoma and Texas are going to be playing in the SEC next year.
They are. I was going to say next year or the year after. Definitely before.
Yeah,
well before.
I don't see it being 2025. That's too long.
The other barrier to the Big Ten doing anything or any of these other conferences really doing anything is that their TV deals are set for like the next 15 years. Like I think the Big Ten has a deal through 2035 and the SEC has a deal through 2035. I don't know what the Pac-12's deal is, but I think anything that's a Pac-12, like I feel like the West Coast is just going to stay separate. And if anything happens, they'll just form one big super conference out there with like the BYU's and the Boise States if they don't join the
I don't
Big
know.
12.
I've seen some rumblings on the like reportings and things like that saying that the Big Ten should try poaching some bigger teams out of the Pac-12.
My first instinct is like, well, that doesn't work. But then nowadays, like travel is just nothing. These schools make millions and millions of dollars.
And they just rent a plane.
And they can just run a plane. Exactly. So I guess so. I would rather that not happen because I'm like
same. I'm not saying I want it to happen. I'm saying like I just if I'm the Big Ten commissioner and I'm seeing these other schools making $30-40 million and my schools are not making that, I have to keep Ohio State, Michigan, and Penn State happy. How am I going to do that?
Mm-hmm.
How am I not going to lose them to the SEC later on down the road and be shocked like Bob Bowlesby or whatever the hell his name is.
Yeah.
Because that had to be the fucking shock of his life.
You imagine he was just at home, like with his wife he
was on a plane. He was on a plane he was at Kansas on a campus visit and he got off the plane and
got the alert.
Laugh. Yeah. I mean, and you know that they timed that too. Like they knew he was on the plane, and they're like, "All right, it just took off. So like, let's
drop it.
Click. Let's post this now so that he can't. He has 2 hours to respond."
He probably had Wi-Fi on the plane because it was probably really nice.
More than likely,
but I just imagine him on airplane mode, and he gets off the plane, he flips his phone out of airplane mode, and then it's just like an avalanche of messages and notifications.
Yeah, that's how I imagined it too. I mean, I know
it's funnier to imagine it.
He had Wi-Fi on the plane and like knew it happened, but like, I just like wow.
So I just kind of looked at my notes and maybe just kind of we'll start wrapping this up after this because
sure.
We have now gone on for 40 minutes now. The playoff. The impact that this will have on especially expanding the playoffs with the talk of that coming up in the next couple of years. So I remember we talked, the initial plans were the 6 highest ranked conference champions and then the 6 after that, the 6 highest rated teams selected by the committee. How do you think this kind of move will affect that? Will we start seeing a 4-loss SEC team making the playoffs?
Unfortunately, I think that the playoff expansion idea is going to be put on hold. I think that, unfortunately, you're going to see, people like Ohio State's athletic director came out on Thursday or Friday, and basically said, like, we don't want Gene Smith, I think is his name.
Yeah.
Gene Smith came out and said, I think that we need to hit pause on this discussion because of all of the craziness and uncertainty. And it's like, no, shut the fuck up, Gene Smith. You just don't want to see 4 SEC teams in the playoffs.
Yeah.
That's the only reason you're talking. Because if it was the Big Ten that expanded, he'd be like, well, why would we not expand the playoffs?
Well,
why wouldn't we?
It definitely wouldn't be like how it's originally reported now with like the 6 highest rated conference champions, because if you're just taking away the Big 12, so what would be?
I have a meeting for it coming up, and it's actually very interesting because it's so. You want to know who is on the committee? I know at least three people. I think there's 4 or 5 people on the committee. You want to know the 3 that I know?
Who?
So the group of 5 representatives, the Mountain West Conference Commissioner. And then you have, I think it's like 2 guys from like random schools, bigger schools. And then you have the SEC Commissioner.
Okay.
And the Big 12 Commissioner.
Oh,
that's going to be such a fun conversation. I would pay hundreds of dollars.
They need to
live stream that shit. Oh, yeah, and it's coming up too. It's like in a couple weeks too.
I want to be the guy who's in charge of assigned seating in that room.
Oh yeah.
Just put the Big 12 and the SEC right next to each other.
Across the table from each other.
No, next to each other. Right next to each other. Oh, that's good.
Well, I mean, yeah, it's going to be definitely interesting. And on that note, we could keep going on and talking about scenarios. It's a ridiculous amount of things that could happen. And I think that we should probably wrap this conversation up just for the sake of time, because I could talk about it for the next 20 years.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not a conversation that's ending anytime soon. It's just going to keep on. More and more stuff's going to keep happening. I'm sure this isn't the last thing that's ever going to happen in terms of conference realignment. So,
I'm trying to keep a positive outlook. I think that more people want to see a positive outcome happen, and I think more people are now concerned with what is going on. And I think that is maybe going to awaken some sort of reckoning that, hey, maybe the MAC doesn't get saved here, but maybe some of the bigger schools in smaller conferences, maybe they get saved here.
Yeah.
And I think that's a best case scenario for me at this point.
I think I just look at it selfishly at first as a Purdue fan, just like, how does this?
I'm looking at it entirely selfishly. I would like to see this not happen.
Yeah. But
it is happening, so I have to hope for the best.
Yep.
Okay.
Well, that was a fun and meandering conversation we just had.
Well, it very much so was. If you have any feelings on this, or want to comment on anything that we've had to say, please leave a comment. If you like our content, please like our video or podcast. We'd appreciate it. So otherwise, have a good rest of your day, people.